Imagine walking into a house that you fully own.
Right.
Like you paid off the mortgage years ago, the bank handed you the deed, the title is completely clear, and it's legally registered in your name.
Zero ambiguity.
Exactly, zero ambiguity. But then you walk into your own living room, and there's a guy standing there with a clipboard.
Of course there is.
Yeah, and he's wearing this cheap plastic security badge, and he's actively charging you rent.
Unbelievable.
I mean, he's auditing your daily routine, he's measuring how you fold your laundry, and he's demanding a monthly payment for a property that is already yours.
Right, which makes no sense at all.
None. In the real world, you wouldn't, pull out your wallet and try to appease him.
No, you'd call the police.
Exactly. You would have him arrested for trespassing and extortion. Yet, when we step into the landscape of modern religion, millions of people are just handing their wallets over to that exact guy with the clipboard.
It's the architectural definition of an illegal extortion racket.
Oh, absolutely. It's like a surveillance state instead of a sanctuary.
Because the entire system is built on ignoring the cleared title deed. They just pretend the mortgage is still active.
Which brings us to the dossier we are looking at today. Welcome to a brand new deep dive, everyone.
Glad to be here.
We have our hands on some truly fascinating etymological and historical research today. It basically performs a forensic excavation of ancient texts.
Yes, specifically zooming in on the Book of James and the letters of Paul in the New Testament.
Right. And the objective here, the whole mission of this deep dive, is to just bypass centuries of institutional mistranslation. We want to look directly at the raw, original, legal and biological jurisdiction of these documents.
Because the translations we rely on, they've been heavily curated.
Curated is a nice way to put it. So if you're listening to this and you have ever felt like your spiritual life is just an endless, exhausting competition, where you are constantly being measured, audited, and just crushed by guilt, this deep dive is for you.
It's essentially an eviction notice for the guy with the clipboard.
I love that, an eviction notice. We are going to look at the original Greek and Hebrew source code that proves the old system has absolutely zero legal jurisdiction over you.
But, to even begin this excavation, we really have to establish the baseline legal reality of the first century.
Right, what the research refers to as the finished contract.
Exactly. If we don't ground ourselves in ancient contract law, the rest of this etymology just won't make any sense.
So walk us through that. What did contract law look like back then?
Well, in the Greco-Roman world, when a debt was fully paid, there was a specific document called the chirographon.
The chirographon, got it.
Yeah, it was the handwritten certificate of debt. And when the debt was settled, that document was legally voided. It was nailed up and crossed out.
So totally canceled.
Completely. So what the texts call the law, which is that old behavioral contract demanding payment through your physical performance, that was completely canceled at the cross.
The ledger is closed. It's a binary state, right? You either owe the bank or you don't. And the text absolutely insists that you don't.
Right. But the religious operative fundamentally refuses to accept a closed ledger.
Because they'd be out of a job.
Exactly. If the ledger is closed, they have no leverage. They have no income. So they demand you keep paying a debt that has been cleared. And to convince you to do that, they are forced to manipulate the original legal documents.
To make it look like the debt is still active, I see this all the time, honestly. Whenever someone starts talking about this finished contract or, resting in the fact that the debt is paid, somebody immediately pulls out 2 Peter chapter 3.
Oh, the ultimate trump card for the clipboard auditors.
Right. They always go there. Peter warns about unstable men who are twisting Paul's letters. And the institutional gatekeepers use that to say, well, look, Paul's teachings on grace are dangerous.
They're hard to understand, supposedly.
Yeah, they say if you take this cleared ledger idea too far, you are twisting the scripture. You still have to track your behavior.
They basically use Peter as a leash to drag Paul back into the old courtroom.
That is exactly what they do.
But when we actually look at the Koine Greek source code, that entire interpretation completely collapses.
Oh, I love when this happens. Okay, break it down.
The Greek word Peter uses for twist in that verse is streblo.
Streblo. And I'm guessing that doesn't just mean like a slight misunderstanding in a Sunday school class.
Far from it. Streblode is a highly specific, very violent judicial term.
Violent? Right.
Yes. In the ancient Roman legal system, it referred to putting a victim on a physical torture rack.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the equeus. And they would violently stretch their body, literally breaking their limbs and dislocating their joints.
That is horrific. But for what purpose? Just punishment?
No, for one very specific purpose, to force a false confession.
Wait, a false confession?
Exactly. Slaves and political prisoners were put on the streblo to make them say something that wasn't true. Usually, it was just to validate whatever narrative the prosecutor wanted.
That completely changes the framing of the text. So Peter isn't talking about someone innocently misreading a complex theological sentence.
Not at all.
He's describing an intentional, violent, forced distortion of the material.
And the irony here is just breathtaking. The people who are resting in the finished contract, the heirs living in the fully paid-off house, they aren't the ones torturing Paul's writings.
Right, because they are just reading it as a closed ledger.
Exactly. The legalists are the ones doing it. The religious operatives are the ones dragging Paul's letters onto a torture rack, violently dislocating the grammar and breaking the context.
Just to force his writings to support the very behavioral treadmill that Paul spent his entire ministry dismantling.
Yes, they are extracting a false confession from the text to keep you paying rent.
That is wild. I mean, think about the mechanics of this from a modern financial perspective. Trying to appease the system is like trying to pay off a real mortgage with monopoly money.
That is a perfect analogy.
Right. Imagine walking into a legitimate financial institution, you step up to the teller, and you just hand them a stack of bright pink and orange paper money to settle your account.
They're going to look at you like you're insane.
Exactly. The bank teller doesn't care how sincere you are. They don't give you points for trying really hard or, having a good attitude about it. They press the silent alarm and they call security.
Because you are operating completely outside the recognized financial system.
Right. And when you hand them that monopoly money, you aren't just failing to pay the debt. You are insulting the actual currency of the realm. You are validating a fake financial system.
And the king does not accept the monopoly money of human behavioral performance.
No. The only valid, recognized currency that cleared the estate was the blood of the finished work.
The authentic currency.
So when these disbarred security guards try to write you a ticket for breaking their behavioral rules, they are enforcing a fake jurisdiction. They are literally mall cops trying to arrest the actual owner of the property.
Which forces us to look at their primary weapon.
Okay, yeah.
How do they convince an heir, someone who holds the clear title deed, to voluntarily step back onto the treadmill?
Right. How do they force them to pull out the monopoly money in the first place?
To see the mechanics of that bluff, we have to look at how the institution has historically weaponized the book of James.
Oh, James.
Specifically, James chapter 3.
James 3 is the crown jewel of the religious HR department.
It really is.
I mean, this is the chapter they used to frame the entire spiritual experience as just a lifelong competition in behavioral modification. The ultimate goal, according to the standard interpretation of James, is just to be a hyper-polite citizen.
Right. Sit still and be quiet.
Exactly. Don't gossip, don't swear, always watch your tone, and above all, never cause any friction. It shrinks this massive cosmic reality of a new creation down to, like, a handbook for office etiquette.
It is a devastating reduction of the text.
Yeah.
Let's actually look at the mechanics of James 3.13.
Let's do it.
The traditional English translation reads something like, "Who is a wise man and endued with knowledge among you? Let him show out of a good conversation his works with meekness of wisdom."
Right, and the institution isolates those words, good conversation and meekness.
Exactly. And from those two words, they construct an entire theology of passivity. They tell the listener to be quiet, be compliant, and basically be a doormat.
But the original Greek vocabulary doesn't support that HR manual at all, does it?
It absolutely shatters it.
Okay, unpack that for us.
So the word translated as conversation is the Greek word anastrophe.
Anastrophe.
Right. And in the first century, anastrophe had nothing to do with the words coming out of your mouth. It had nothing to do with polite chats over coffee.
Really? Then what did it mean?
It was a spatial and territorial term.
Territorial.
Yes. It meant your manner of life, but specifically how you conduct yourself spatially, how you walk around and your physical footprint on a piece of property. It is literally about how you occupy space.
Oh, wow. So show your works out of a good anastrophe means to show how you confidently walk the perimeter of your own estate.
Exactly.
It has nothing to do with being soft-spoken.
And that territorial confidence is amplified by the next word, which completely destroys the whole doormat theology.
What's the word?
The word they translate as meekness is pretos.
Pretos. Which religion has universally branded as weakness? Turn the other cheek, don't make waves, just take the abuse.
That is perhaps one of the most calculated mistranslations in history.
That's a bold claim.
But it's true. In ancient Greek literature, pretos was not a synonym for weakness. It was a highly specialized military term.
Wait, military?
Yes, ancient Greek commanders, like Xenophon in his treatises on cavalry, he used praetos to describe a wild war horse, a horse that had been captured from the wild and perfectly broken to the bit.
A war horse. We are talking about an animal bred for battle.
A creature of immense, bone-crushing, lethal power. I mean, war horse could trample a man to death in seconds.
Yeah.
But when that horse was praetos, it meant all of that massive, violent energy was entirely at rest and fully submitted to the reins of the rider.
So it's not the absence of power.
Not at all. It is absolute power under perfect authority. It is unbending, bridled strength.
The contrast there is just staggering. When James tells the heir to operate with the prehose of wisdom, he isn't telling them to sit quietly in the back pew and let the religious clipboard guy berate them.
No, he's telling them to occupy their property, their anastrophe, with the massive, unbending structural weight of a war horse. A war horse that takes its cues solely from the sovereign. Right. Now consider the institutional motive for bearing that definition.
Yeah, why would they hide that?
Why would a religious system intentionally render praetos as passive weakness instead of bridled lethal power? It all comes down to control and extraction.
Of course it does.
A congregation that believes they're supposed to be passive, terrified, and constantly doubting their own standing is incredibly easy to manage.
You can manipulate them, you can guilt trip them.
And most importantly, you can extract their resources, their time, and their money.
You can charge them rent on a house they already own.
Precisely. But a congregation of heirs operating with the territorial confidence of anastrophe and the unbending warhorse strength of prehose, you cannot extort them.
No, you can't?
They know the ledger is closed. They don't flinch when the clipboard guy shows up.
Okay, I have to play the skeptic for a moment, though.
Go for it.
Because traditionalists listening to this will immediately point to earlier verses in that exact same chapter.
James 3.6.
Yeah, James 3.6. If James isn't giving us an HR manual for polite church behavior, what is he doing in verse 6? He explicitly says the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity, and that it is set on fire by hell.
Right.
So if that isn't a warning about swearing or gossiping or saying bad words, what is it?
It is a structural warning. But to understand what the tongue is doing, we have to understand where it is actually getting its fuel.
Okay.
And the English translators did us a massive disservice by using the word hell in that verse.
Let me guess, the word hell isn't actually in the original manuscript.
Not once. In James 3.6, the Greek text says the tongue is set on fire by Gehenna.
Gehenna. And this is where their religious system projects Dante's Inferno onto the text, right? They picture this underground cavern made of lava, ruled by demons with pitchforks torturing souls for eternity.
Which would have been entirely foreign to a first-century Jewish audience.
They wouldn't have thought of that at all.
No. When Jesus or James used the word Gehenna, nobody in the crowd pictured a mythological underworld. They pictured a very literal, terrestrial, geographic location.
Where was it?
Gehenna was the Valley of Hinnom. It was a physical valley sitting directly outside the southern walls of Jerusalem.
Oh, wait. I've heard of this. It was the city's incinerator.
Exactly. It was the municipal garbage dump. Historically, it was a place where ancient idolaters practiced child sacrifice to the god Molech.
Wow, dark history.
Very dark. Later, King Josiah intentionally desecrated the valley to stop those practices, turning it into the city's refuse pile.
So it literally became a dump.
Yes. By the 1st century, it was the location where the city threw its garbage, the diseased elements of the community, and the carcasses of dead animals to be burned. It was a place of total biological and structural destruction, filled with sulfur, smoke, and maggots.
Okay, but the traditionalist is going to push back here. They're going to point to Mark 9, where Jesus talks about the fire that never shall be quenched and the worm that doesn't die.
Right, the classic pushback.
Yeah, they use the phrase unquenchable fire to argue for an eternal, conscious torture chamber. How does a municipal garbage dump fit the definition of unquenchable?
Because we have to let the biblical archive define its own vocabulary,
Right.
rather than projecting medieval European poetry onto it.
That makes sense. So how does the Bible define it?
If you look at the mechanics of an unquenchable fire in the ancient Near East, we can turn to the prophet Jeremiah.
Okay, what does Jeremiah say?
In Jeremiah 17.27, God warns Jerusalem that if they continue in rebellion, he will kindle a fire in their gates, and it shall not be quenched.
And we know from history that the gates of Jerusalem did burn, but, I mean, they aren't still burning today. The fire eventually went out.
Exactly. In the scriptural framework, an unquenchable fire does not mean a fire that burns for eternity. It refers to a fire that is so absolute and so fierce that it cannot be put out by human hands until it has completely consumed its fuel source.
Ah, so it's unstoppable.
It is an unstoppable force of destruction. Fire, by its very chemical nature, destroys. It does not preserve.
Right, fire doesn't keep things alive forever to torture them. It burns them up.
Precisely. So when Jesus or James uses the imagery of Gehenna, they are not threatening people with an eternal torture basement.
Then what are they doing?
They are stating a structural biological fact about the old law. If you demand to be defined by your physical performance, if you reject the living blueprint of the cleared estate and insist on clinging to the dead contract, that dead material has a fixed expiration date.
It ends up in the incinerator.
Exactly. The old system is literally burning trash.
That is incredible. And that exact legal reality brings us right back to the mechanics of the tongue in James 3.
Yes, let's connect the dots.
If the legalist's tongue is being fueled by a literal garbage dump, if it is set on fire by Gehenna, what exactly is happening when they open their mouths and speak over the heirs of the estate?
This is where all the pieces lock together. Look at James 3.9.
Okay.
James says that with the same tongue we bless the Father, we curse men.
And religion just assumes a curse means yelling a profanity at someone in traffic or, wishing them bad luck.
Right, just saying something mean. But in the biblical and ancient Roman legal archives, a curse is a highly specific jurisdictional reality.
This feels like a crucial pivot. What is the biblical definition of a curse?
We had to cross-reference this with Paul's legal mathematics in Galatians 3.8.
What does Paul say?
Paul writes, "As many as are of the works of the law are under the curse."
Wow.
In the scriptural framework, the curse is the unbending demand of the old, obsolete covenant. It is the law itself. It demands perfect physical output and pays only in death.
Wait, let me make sure I'm getting this. So when a religious operative looks at an heir of new creation, someone who is entirely cleared by the blood, someone holding the title deed and that operative demands works, audits their behavior, and lays down the law, they aren't just being annoying
No.
or overly strict, they are actively speaking a curse over them.
Yes. They are operating as an unauthorized prosecutor, using acoustic energy to enforce a dead jurisdiction.
I really want to visualize the actual mechanics of this for the listener because understanding this changes everything about how you experience religious guilt.
It changes everything.
Imagine your pristine, fully paid off estate. You have the title deed in your hand. The marble floors are spotless. The air is clear.
A perfect environment.
Right. Then the sin police show up with their clipboards, and they are literally dragging burning, toxic, diseased trash from the obsolete city dump from the Gehenna incinerator, and they are dropping it right onto your pristine marble floor.
They are bringing the environmental contamination of the old law right into your house.
Yes. And while this thick, toxic smoke is billowing into your living room, ruining the furniture, making you cough and your eyes water, they have the absolute audacity to look at you and tell you that you are dirty.
That perfectly captures the cognitive dissonance of religious legalism.
It's infuriating when you picture it like that.
But it's so accurate. The guilt, the shame, the heaviness you feel when you are subjected to religious manipulation, that is not the conviction of the Holy Spirit.
No.
The Spirit of the Sovereign does not deal in condemnation or behavioral audits. What you are feeling in those moments is the toxic, secondhand smoke of a dead law being illegally pumped into your living room.
You are choking on the burning trash of Gehenna.
That's exactly what James is warning the assembly about. He is saying that when a teacher demands performance, when they bring the old contract back into the house, they are setting the entire structural footprint of the estate on fire with the garbage of the old covenant.
They are burning down the house with the incinerator's The implication for the listener is massive. I mean, it means you have to completely change how you engage with the security guard.
You have to stop playing their game.
Right. When they hand you a behavioral checklist and tell you that you aren't doing enough, you don't look at the checklist.
No.
You don't try to prove how many boxes you ticked or hand them monopoly money to show how hard you're trying. You point to the property line, you tell them their jurisdiction expired 2,000 years ago, and you evict them.
Exactly.
But, okay, that forces us to ask about their motives. Why would anyone do this? What drives a person to pretend to be a security guard for an estate they don't even own? Why drag the burning trash into someone else's house?
To understand the motive, we have to expose the internal engine of the legalist.
Let's do it.
And James unmasks this engine in chapter 3, verse 14, where he introduces a concept called aletheia.
Arethea. What is the etymology behind that word?
It is one of the most revealing words in the entire New Testament, and its evolution really tells the whole story here.
Okay, where does it start?
Originally, in ancient Greek literature, Arethea referred to hired day labor.
Day labor, like agricultural work.
Yeah, it described a mercenary worker, someone who was paid strictly by their physical output. You spin a certain amount of wool, you get a certain wage, you work a day, you get paid for a day.
A pure performance-based economy.
Exactly. But by the time we reached the 1st century, during the Roman era, the word had culturally evolved.
What did it turn into?
It moved from describing agricultural day labor to describing a very specific kind of socio-political behavior. It came to mean self-seeking rivalry, factional ambition, and specifically political electioneering or canvassing for office.
Political electioneering. So it shifted from working for a wage to campaigning for votes.
Yes. And notice how the legalist embodies both definitions perfectly.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Because they refuse to accept the closed ledger of the finished contract, they still believe they are day laborers in the spiritual economy.
Right, they think they have to earn a wage through their physical performance.
But deep down, they know they can't fulfill the contract. So to prove their own worth and soothe their anxiety, they launch a political campaign for God's approval.
And you can't run a political campaign without a constituency.
Exactly. To be a religious politician, you need a voting base. You need a behavioral standard to measure yourself against so you can prove you are superior to the so-called sinners.
Right, you need people to look down on.
You need to build a faction of people who agree with your specific set of rules. You enforce the law to keep everyone ranked, ensuring you remain conveniently at the top of the hierarchy.
That is a complete inversion of grace. James looks at this Arethea, this bitter, factional, wage-earning ambition, and he absolutely bankrupts it.
He says in verse 15 that this kind of wisdom does not descend from above, but is earthly, sensual, and demonic.
But let me ask you this, because I think it's a question a lot of listeners struggle with, especially when they're dealing with religious family members or local leaders.
It's a common question, yeah.
Are these people actively malicious? Do they wake up in the morning rubbing their hands together thinking, how can I extort the heirs today? Or are they just deeply insecure and completely blind to what they are doing?
That is the tragedy of the situation, honestly. It is rarely cartoonish villainy.
Right, it's not like a movie villain.
No, it is usually a profound, agonizing double-mindedness. They are trapped in their own counterfeit ledger. When they fail, they desperately want grace and forgiveness for their own salvation.
Of course they do.
But they demand the unbending, rigid law for your salvation because measuring your failures is the only way they maintain their leverage and superiority over you.
This is so exhausting.
It is. And the Greek actually has a specific word for this kind of systemic, exhausting exploitation.
What's the word?
It's called ponoria.
Ponoria. What are the mechanics of that word?
It derives from the root word ponos, which means hard labor, pain, or bone-crushing toil. But in 1st century commercial Greek, poneria evolved to describe a system of heavy, exhausting, illegitimate extortion. It is the parasitic ideology of the sweat economy.
The sweat economy. I mean, that is just such a vivid phrase.
Yes. Poneria is what happens when an institution monetizes your vulnerability.
Wow. Monetizing vulnerability.
They convince you that you are fundamentally flawed, they make you sweat and labor for an approval you already legally own, and then they collect the institutional dividends.
Which is your money, your obedience, and your time.
Exactly.
It's an illegitimate toll booth. They are standing on a bridge that the king already paid for, and they're demanding you pay them for the privilege of crossing.
That's exactly what they're doing.
Okay, so we've identified the security guard's bluff. We've exposed the Gehenna incinerator and how they pump the toxic smoke of the dead law right into the living room.
Yes.
We've unmasked the Arethea, the political campaign of the flesh, and this poneria sweat economy. We have completely stripped the legal jurisdiction of the sin police.
The eviction is absolute.
It really is. But this is the exact moment where the traditionalists listening are going to start hyperventilating.
Oh, I can hear the objections already.
The pushback is entirely predictable, right?
Yeah.
They will say, well, if you completely evict the sin police, and if you tell people they have zero obligation to the old law, you are endorsing anarchy.
Chaos in the streets.
Exactly. It's going to be chaos. Does grace mean there are zero boundaries? Can an heir just walk out the front door and start hurting people without consequence?
It is the oldest, most tired accusation in the history of theology. And it is completely bankrupt.
Why is it bankrupt?
Because it relies on a massive, arrogant assumption. It assumes that the only thing keeping humanity from burning the world down is a pastor with a religious clipboard.
Right. It's the argument that says, if I don't have the literal threat of hell hanging over my head, I'll just go rob a bank and traffic drugs.
Which honestly says way more about the dark state of their own psychology than it says about the nature of grace.
Totally. But we do have to answer the question of boundaries. We can't just ignore it. We have to establish what this research calls the iron perimeter. What is the actual structural difference between true justice and religious extortion?
To establish that perimeter, we really have to define the strict legal boundaries of the estate.
Okay.
Grace is an open door to the vault. It is not an exemption from the police for feral behavior. We must distinguish between the internal cleared estate and the external extraction grid.
Let's lay out the legal reality of the internal estate first. What happens inside the house?
We go back to Paul's jurisprudence in Romans 4.15. Paul states basically a law of physics here. Where there is no law, there is no transgression.
Period.
Period. Inside the boundaries of the estate, you are judged entirely by the blood of the finished contract, not by your behavioral output. The ledger is closed. The title is clear.
So inside the house, the sin police have absolutely no jurisdiction. The old law cannot touch the air.
Correct. But what happens if someone walks out of the house, enters the public street, and starts running an extortion racket?
Right.
What if they start trafficking the vulnerable or exploiting the innocent? Does the sovereign just look the other way because of grace?
Not a chance.
Exactly. The sovereign does not ignore the feral extraction grid. The nomos, the unbending structural weight of true justice, violently crushes the trespass.
The boundary line holds.
Yes. When the Old Testament prophets looked down the timeline at the macroscopic execution of justice, they didn't see an out-of-control wildfire burning everyone indiscriminately.
They didn't.
No. They saw a highly selective, perfectly engineered furnace that specifically targeted the arrogance of the feral operators while protecting the heirs.
This is where the physics of Malachi 4 come into play, isn't it? The imagery here is brutal, and it's clearly not meant to be read as some soft metaphor.
It is an architectural and physical reality. Malachi 4 says, "And ye shall tread down the wicked, for they shall be ashes under the soles of your feet in the day that I shall do this, saith the Lord of hosts."
Okay, we have to look at the Hebrew source code here, specifically the words epher and kaf regal. Unpack the mechanics of those two words for us.
So epher is literal physical ash.
Literal ash.
Yes, it is the powdery, incinerated residue left behind after a structure has been completely subjected to fire. It is what remains when the structural integrity of a system is entirely annihilated.
Wow. And what about kappa regal?
Kaf regal is the physical, anatomical soul of the human foot. It is the specific point of contact where a biological body meets the physical dirt.
So Malachi isn't describing some ethereal, spiritualized victory floating in the clouds.
Not at all.
He is describing the physical, biological enforcement of justice on the terrestrial grid. The feral system, the corrupt extraction grid that preys on the innocent, is mathematically reduced to physical ash under the boots of the heirs.
And we see the exact same architectural enforcement in the prophet Joel.
What does Joel say?
Joel 3-point descent says, "The Lord also shall roar out of Zion, and utter his voice from Jerusalem, and the heavens and the earth shall shake. But the Lord will be the hope of his people, and the strength of the children of Israel."
The Hebrew vocabulary in that verse is stunning. That word for roar isn't just a lion making a loud noise in the jungle, is it?
No, the word is shag. When the kinsman redeemer, the true sovereign of the estate, finally speaks over the feral extraction grid, he executes the absolute, unyielding enforcement of his property rights.
The roar.
Yes, the shagag is an acoustic frequency broadcast over the physical dirt. And when that frequency hits the unauthorized systems, the corrupt institutions, they violently quake and completely collapse.
Just from the frequency.
Exactly. And the Hebrew word for that collapse is rahash.
Jog and ra'ash, the acoustic frequency and the structural collapse.
But look at the contrasting reality for the heirs. While the feral grid is collapsing under the frequency of the roar, the text says the sovereign operates as a machasa for his people.
Machas. What is the structural definition of that word?
It translates to a heavy, impenetrable physical fortress. It is a shelter from the storm. It is a refuge from the collapse.
So, to summarize the mechanics of the iron perimeter, the perimeter holds, true justice is executed, the innocent are vindicated, and the predator is reduced to ash.
That's it, exactly.
But notice the critical distinction here for anyone listening is justice comes from the sovereign protecting his estate, not from a religious politician auditing your weekly mistakes.
Yes.
The lion roaring to destroy an international extortion ring has absolutely nothing to do with a pastor making you feel guilty for missing a Sunday service or failing some arbitrary behavioral checklist.
Exactly. The religious system tries to hijack the roar of the lion. They try to use the threat of the shag to enforce their petty middle management behavioral rules right inside your living room.
It's just absurd.
But the lion isn't roaring at the heirs inside the house. The lion is roaring at the wolves trying to break through the perimeter.
The audacity of the clipboard guy is staggering when you see the whole picture.
It really is.
So let's trace the arc of what we've discovered today. We started by looking at the violent torture rack of 2 Peter, where legalists were using the strebloke to violently twist Paul's words and force a false confession of debt.
Then we moved into the weaponization of James 3, proving that praeses is not the passive weakness of a doormat, but the bridled, lethal strength of a warhorse, occupying its property with anastrophe.
We stood at the edge of the Gehenna incinerator and realized that when the legalist demands performance, their tongue is fueled by the burning garbage of a dead covenant. They are dragging toxic smoke into your pristine living room and speaking a legal curse over the finished work.
And we exposed the internal engine driving the Marathia, the political electioneering of insecure day laborers trying to build constituency through the Poneria sweat economy.
And finally, we verified the iron perimeter, the unshakable Machasa fortress of Joel, the boundary line that executes flawless justice on the extraction grid without putting the heirs on a behavioral treadmill.
It's all there in the source code.
You hold the title deed to the estate. The sin police are disbarred attorneys. Their paperwork is fake. Their security badges are plastic, and their jurisdiction expired at the cross. You don't owe them rent, you don't owe them an explanation, and you certainly don't owe them any monopoly money.
The ledger's closed. The balance is entirely zero.
But before we finish, there is one final provocative concept in this research that I want to leave you, the listener, to mull over.
This part is fascinating.
We spent a lot of time today talking about the destructive acoustic power of the legalist's tongue, how they use vocal energy to transmit the toxic virus of the old law. But what about your tongue? What about the vocal capacity of the air?
This is where we cross into the mechanics of the Kalantos command.
Let's look at Romans 4.17. Paul talks about the God who gives life to the dead and calls into existence the things that do not exist. That Greek word is kaluntos. It is the divine technology of speaking reality into existence. The universe wasn't built with hammers, nails, and scaffolding. It was framed by acoustic instruction. God spoke, the frequency was released, and matter obeyed.
And this is where the biology of the new creation becomes absolutely paramount. As an heir, the text designates you as the kaini katasis, a completely new species.
A new species.
Yes. And you are infused with the sperma, the actual genetic DNA of the father. Because you carry that DNA, your vocal cords are designed to execute that exact same kaluntos command.
So here's the question you need to explore on your own, the thing to really chew on. If the old law is a toxic acoustic virus transmitted by the tongue of the legalist, what happens to your actual physical biology, your cellular health, your neurology, your physical reality when you flat out refuse to vocalize their dead law?
What happens when you just stop agreeing with the prosecutor?
Yes. What happens when your vocal cords only broadcast the uncurtained, frictionless reality of the cleared estate? When you stop talking about how much you struggle, how unworthy you are, how dirty you are, and how hard you have to work to please God, and instead you just start issuing the Kolonkos command of a fully funded heir.
The physics of the new creation demand a new vocabulary. You cannot operate the biological blueprint of the cleared estate using the language of the Gehenna incinerator.
Could shedding the vocabulary of the sin police literally rewire your DNA? Could dropping the language of the sweat economy and speaking only the finished contract instantly upgrade your biological operating system?
It is the ultimate practical application of everything we've uncovered today. The words you speak are either validating the clipboard guy or they're enforcing your property rights.
So the next time you walk into the living room of your estate and you see that guy with the clipboard trying to audit your life, don't argue with him. Don't hand him monopoly money. Don't try to prove how hard you're working.
No, just tell him his jurisdiction expired.
Exactly. Open the front door and let the roar of the lion blow him right off the porch.
The estate is cleared.
Thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us. The title deed is yours. Enjoy the property.